Welcome to the Gary Null Show, a program designed to enhance mental, physical, and spiritual well-being through science and the wisdom of the ages. Let us take you on a journey of empowerment. Sit back, relax, and get ready to change your life for good.
Hi, I'm Gary Null. I'd like to welcome you to our program. I realize people are joining us for the first time every week. We're here to talk about health and nutrition and how to improve the quality of your life. If you're the average person, you probably haven't intentionally hurt yourself, but eating the basic 4 food group and having moderation in all things has created body toxicity. What does it mean? What are the symptoms? How does it affect you? And most importantly, how can you reverse this process? That's what we're going to show you today. Join me now for Detoxification, a natural approach.
One of my favorite expressions to try to talk to my patients is that if you're sitting on a tack, it takes a lot of aspirin to make it feel good. Meaning the best treatment for tack sitting is tack removal. And if you add something that may, in fact, not help at all to dislodge the tack, but just numb you to the presence of the tack, you're not just taking a kind of false step, but you're adding a burden to the body that may make quite a difference to your chemistry. Most of the medicines that we take, and I'm not opposed to taking medicines, but most of them we take do add an additional burden to our capacity to detoxify.
One of America's leading health authorities for many, many years was Dr. Hazel Parcells. She had what was called the Parcells Plan for Health and Longevity. Joseph Dispenza worked for many years with Hazel Parcells on helping people understand the many ways that we become toxic and natural ways of cleansing them from our system.
7 steps of the Parcells method were developed by Dr. Hazel Parcells. Dr. Parcells was born in 1889 and she died in 1996. She lived a very full and rich life to 106. And much of her longevity she attributed to her method, which she developed over about 65 years. The first step of the 7 steps of the Parcells method is detoxification. Dr. Parcells felt that it was very, very important to put new wine into new wineskins and not old wineskins, meaning that if we put good, nutritious, clean food into bodies that are prepared by a very thorough detox, that we were going to get much more nutritional benefit from that, and it would be very health-giving, in fact. So detoxification, the cornerstone of the Parcells method.
The symptoms of a toxic brain can be very, very expansive. Brain toxicity or neurotoxicity can manifest itself in a variety of ways. People can have irritation of their peripheral nervous system, which would give symptoms like neuropathy, numbness in their hands, difficulty walking, and difficulty with their balance. Conversely, the central nervous system is also vulnerable to toxins from the environment, and these can cause problems such as confusion, behavioral difficulties, dementia, spinal cord problems. So really any area of the nervous system is vulnerable to various types of environmental toxins.
These 2 systems, the central nervous system and the immune system, whose joint activity is perceiving the world around us and remembering it, and then responding to it by a process we call recognition. that these two places, these two activities of the body, are the home of permanent cells. And we want to take good care of these cells. It's almost as if they're the queen bee in the hive, and all the other are worker bees. If we remember that we are the owners of these permanent cells, which are in many ways the repository of our enduring self, then we may take a little bit more serious approach toward protecting them from accumulating toxins that will impair the health of these permanent cells. To me, this notion that there are within us these two populations of permanent cells is one of the most important facts that I've learned as a doctor, and guides me especially in thinking about this business of detoxification, that getting rid of things in our body is not just so that our skin stays looking nice. We can get new skin tomorrow, so to speak, in terms of the replacement of cells that come with the healing of a rash or a small scar from a trauma. But we cannot get new cells in our central nervous system and in our immune system.
The brain is a particularly vulnerable organ to toxins. The reason why the brain is particularly vulnerable to toxins are for several reasons. One is that a small area of damage to the brain could produce very, very profound effects. This is in contrast to other organ systems like the liver, for instance, or other organ systems in which if you lose a small area of that organ system, you may not necessarily see clinical problems. But in the brain, even a small area of brain damage could produce very, very profound neurological problems. The second reason why the brain is particularly vulnerable to environmental toxins is because it lacks the reparative processes that you normally find in other cells of the body. The third reason that the brain is particularly vulnerable to toxins is because there's a highly advanced communication network that the brain uses. It's a very, very intricate system that basically the world's most powerful and sophisticated computer pales in comparison to the ability of the brain to process and communicate information. Well, you can imagine that if you interrupt this elaborate circuitry that exists in the brain, you can really have catastrophic and devastating clinical manifestations.
When people are reacting to chemicals, all parts of the immune system are being affected. Once an allergic reaction starts, there's an immune cascade that takes place. Histamine and serotonin are released from the mast cells in the body, and these cause inflammatory symptoms and unpleasant symptoms. Other chemicals that are released affect the brain, and this is where the brain fag or the brain fatigue comes in that makes it difficult for people to think. Most of the time when people have brain symptoms where they're either confused or they don't have memory, they're reacting to a chemical.
One of the interesting relationships of brain diseases is its relationship to the immune system. The immune system functions as a highly sophisticated alarm system or security system for the rest of the body, including the brain. The immune system utilizes a variety of substances, including cytokines, which are these messenger molecules that communicate with other parts of the body to mobilize immune cells. Well, we know that these cytokines are neurologically active. There are receptors on brain cells that actually respond to these immune signaling devices. This is a beneficial effect, but there's also a double-edged sword. The reason why it's a double-edged sword is because when the immune system actually goes on an offensive, for instance, if a person is exposed to a virus or has head trauma or is exposed to a variety of neurotoxins, this mobilizes the immune system. When the immune system is mobilized, a variety of things happen, including the migration of certain types of white blood cells that are highly toxic to the foreign invader. For instance, if a person is exposed to a bacteria or a virus, the immune system sends out pellets of poison which actually neutralize the invader. Unfortunately, that this also makes the brain particularly vulnerable to the immune system as well. It's sort of like an innocent bystander. The immune system goes on the offensive against what's a perceived threat to itself, but in the process of this elaborates certain types of chemicals, including free radicals, that are actually very, very damaging to a person's own nervous system.
Fatigue of all types probably one of the most common symptoms that people come to a doctor's office for. And many times everything will be normal on blood tests and exam, and eventually they're told that it's psychiatric. And yet fatigue, especially including brain fatigue, inability to concentrate, to focus, to stay on task, can be a sign of toxicity.
Memory problems are a common neurological type symptom. People may have no short-term memory at all. They may have some long-term memory of things that happened back before they got sick, but they'll have virtually no short-term memory.
The two extremes of vulnerability for people exposed to brain toxins are at an early age, infants and children, and people at the other extreme, the elderly. The reason for this is as follows. Children are very vulnerable to brain toxicity because the nervous system is going through a high rate of development and growth at that period of time. Conversely, old people are also vulnerable to brain toxicity because of the fact that they have lost their ability of a concept called plasticity, which means that the brain is able to repair itself.
Dr. David Perlmutter is a physician who uses nutritional approaches for brain and neurological toxicity, and also to help people with Parkinson's, ALS, and multiple sclerosis, using detoxification as a primary modality in treating people.
So what we're finding is that certain individuals, because of a genetic predisposition, are unable to handle exposure to certain toxic substances in the environment, like pesticides and herbicides, and other types of toxic things that are being produced at the rate of 3 new substances every day. So while most people can handle toxic substances of one form or another, certain people, by virtue of a genetic flaw in their liver detoxification systems, are unable to handle these toxic exposures. What happens then is, when they are exposed to certain toxic things in their environment, these toxic elements accumulate in their bodies and cause degenerative changes or destruction in the nervous system, leading to such things as Parkinson's disease and Lou Gehrig's disease, or ALS. Now let's take, for example, Parkinson's disease. Our published research has demonstrated that in the younger population with Parkinson's disease, and we mean typically 55 years or younger, very frequently these individuals are suffering from a very easily demonstrated enzyme detoxification flaw. Now this is sort of a unique perspective in that here we have a brain disorder which typically is evaluated and treated by brain specialists, but in actuality what we are finding is the primary disorder resides in the liver, or the main detoxification organ of the body. Now we've done liver detoxification studies on many of these younger patients and found that in fact most of them demonstrate significant flaws in the way that their liver is able to detoxify chemicals to which they are exposed.
I think that unfortunately most physicians don't have a high index of suspicion in the relationship of exposure to environmental toxins and neurological problems. There is a lot of ongoing research that has not reached the clinician's hands, looking at studies correlating, for instance, heavy metal toxicity with multiple sclerosis or with Lou Gehrig's disease. There's a lot of epidemiological studies with, for instance, cadmium and ALS. So I think that it's not difficult for a clinician to miss these things if they're not thinking about them when a patient presents with a variety of unusual neurological symptoms. It's easier to either pigeonhole them into a particular disease classification or to basically dismiss the patient as having psychological problems.
Now the exciting thing about recognizing and understanding this whole concept, this whole mechanism, is that in fact there are now therapeutic techniques which can upregulate or turn back on the liver detoxification systems in these people. A technique developed by Dr. Jeff Bland, as a matter of fact, is designed to actually turn back on certain flawed enzyme systems, allowing these individuals to appropriately detoxify those chemicals to which they are exposed. We have had dramatic results in patients with Parkinson's disease, for example, certain of them who do demonstrate significant detoxification flaws, when we place them on a certain program that allows their liver enzymes to become much more functional. They have significant clinical improvement, their requirement for medication goes down dramatically, and overall they feel better. But what's most important is the fact that their disease process slows down. Their rate of degeneration slows down, and this is certainly a major step forward. We're finding similar enzyme flaws in patients with Lou Gehrig's disease, and it's probable that with research we're going to find similar enzyme problems with detoxification in most neurodegenerative diseases. We undertook a study of treating these patients with a very specific nutritional program designed to increase the efficiency of their liver detoxification activity. And what we have found is that many of these patients have a profound improvement in their Parkinson's disease. The videotape that we're going to demonstrate now shows a patient, a 38-year-old physical therapist, who for the past 2 years has been demonstrating progressively worsening symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Now, as a child, he had a significant exposure to toxic elements. He and his friends used to follow the tractor that sprayed chemicals on the agricultural fields right across the street from where he lived. They would do this for fun, and he recalls quite vividly smelling and inhaling the chemicals that they were spraying on the crops. 2 years ago, or 2 years prior to the onset of his problem, he remembers that he began feeling quite sluggish, and indeed that marks the beginning of his symptomatology with respect to Parkinson's disease. Now, at the beginning of the videotape, you'll see him before treatment, and at this point he is on a fairly high dosage of the typical medications used for Parkinson's. If you pay attention to the date in the lower right-hand corner of the video, you'll notice that we'll demonstrate this patient some 2 weeks later, and you'll see that in fact he has a profound improvement of tremor and also the fluidity of his movement, the way that his arms move when he walks, and the ability of the patient to smile, and indeed, if you'll notice, even his blinking rate is faster. But pay particular attention to the before and after experience with respect to the tremor of his hands. Now, mind you, this is not an achievement made by giving him more medication. In fact, during that 2-week period of time, his medication was cut down dramatically. The only other therapeutic intervention that took place was increasing the efficiency of his liver function, of his liver detoxification ability, by putting him on a specific nutritional program designed to turn on his liver enzymes. It is known that the mechanism by which these toxic elements destroy brain tissue is by enhancing free radical oxidation, thus increasing the antioxidant potential of the patient is also very critically important. That's why we use substances like high-dosage vitamin E, vitamin C, the trace element selenium, and alpha-lipoic acid in a dosage of approximately 500 milligrams each day. An herbal substance has been found to be dramatically helpful in enhancing the way the liver detoxifies. And that herb is called silymarin, or milk thistle, and that makes up a very important part of our liver upregulation program. Now, the program that I've described here for this patient and our other younger patients with Parkinson's disease is very similar to that which we use for a variety of neurodegenerative diseases, like Lou Gehrig's disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. For what we find in Lou Gehrig's disease is quite similar. These patients demonstrate a significant increase in incidence of exposure to toxic elements in the environment, and clearly their problem, the mechanism of their problem, deals with enhanced free radical oxidation of the brain. So our goal is to limit the effect that these toxics have on the body by increasing liver detoxification activity and increasing their antioxidant potential by using things like L-glutathione, high-dosage vitamin E, vitamin C, the trace element selenium, which is important for glutathione production, and a very important brain antioxidant, which is alpha-lipoic acid, in a dosage of from 500 to 1,000 milligrams each day.
Acetyl L-carnitine actually is being studied for a therapeutic role in Alzheimer's disease. It has a variety of interesting effects. One of its effects is it's an antioxidant, again at the level of the mitochondria. It also increases the ability of the mitochondria to utilize beneficial substances, including fats, so the mitochondria could function more adequately. Another interesting substance which has been used and looked at in relationship to neurological problems is selenium. Selenium has the ability to increase superoxide dismutase. Superoxide dismutase, like glutathione, are two of the most important intracellular antioxidant systems that protect our cells, including our brain cells, from oxidative injury.
So what we find to be dramatically helpful in these patients, giving them a much better feeling of well-being, increasing their energy and their cognitive performance, is to approach that problem of mitochondrial deficiency or energy utilization deficiency using substances like coenzyme Q10, for example, in dosages of approximately 200 milligrams each day. We find that these patients, when treated with a comprehensive nutritional approach, feel better. Brain performance enhances. Cognitive performance enhances. Level of disability goes down dramatically, and perhaps what is most rewarding and most striking is the fact that their medication requirements often go down dramatically as well. We see increased cognitive performance, for example, in patients with Alzheimer's disease, given various nutritional supplements which are so widely and commonly used in Europe, for example, and in the East for enhancing cognitive performance. Things like ginkgo biloba, L-acetylcarnitine, phosphatidylserine, high-dosage vitamin E. In other countries, these are used readily and are known to enhance cognitive performance. These nutritional supplements play a very dramatic role in enhancing the well-being and indeed the cognitive performance of Alzheimer's patients. So overall, nutritional concepts, nutritional approaches have a dramatic effect in a variety of neurodegenerative diseases. The results that we are seeing are extremely important and extremely dramatic, and should certainly be, this information should certainly spread to other physicians, even those practicing mainstream neurology.
Ginkgo biloba is another example of a substance. It's actually a Chinese herb. It's one of the oldest Chinese herbs recorded in literature across the world, and it has a variety of beneficial effects in brain wellness, and also a variety of beneficial effects for brain neurological problems. Ginkgo biloba has several properties. One, it prevents clumping of platelets. We know that a large array of neurological problems may also be due to lack of cerebral blood flow to certain areas of the brain. As we age, our blood vessels become less pliable. We lose circulation to our brain, and this lack of circulation to the brain actually produces a inability to deliver appropriate antioxidants and other nutrients to cells. What ginkgo biloba does is actually increases the flow of blood to the microvascular system, small blood vessels that permeate deep areas of the brain.
We need to develop programs and get the word out that the way to slow the progression of these diseases is to enhance antioxidant activity. Things like vitamin E and alpha-lipoic acid and precursors of L-glutathione are critically important in reducing the rate of progression of these diseases. Essential fatty acid supplementation has found a very important role in diseases like multiple sclerosis, which are primarily autoimmune, or diseases characterized by enhanced activity of the immune system. What happens in multiple sclerosis specifically is the immune system is simply carried away and acts over-efficiently, overactivity of the immune system, causing the immune cells to actually destroy certain brain parts. That can be controlled with essential fatty acid supplementation. Now that involves using supplements like fish oil, or primrose oil, borage seed oil, and flaxseed oil, higher than typical dosages of vitamin C and B complex with trace minerals. These activities form in the body, these chemicals form in the body, certain chemicals which are designed, or rather which nature provides to calm down the immune system and regulate it. Now, the typical approach to controlling the immune system in a disease like multiple sclerosis is to administer very powerful medicines which actually turn off the entire immune system. Things much like chemotherapy, things like steroids, which we know have profound side effects and therefore downsides. A nutritional approach to a disease like multiple sclerosis provides nutrients which are healthful for the body, things which calm the immune system in a very natural and balancing way, as opposed to turning off the entire immune system in a very unnatural way, which is fraught with significant side effects.
Many neurological diseases, including neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Lou Gehrig's disease, and multiple sclerosis, have many medical studies which have shown that free radicals are really the final common pathway of producing brain damage. These free radicals interrupt the cellular machinery of brain cells. A particularly vulnerable area of brain cells to free radical injury is an area of cells called the mitochondria. Mitochondria are an intracellular system which is involved for the manufacture of energy for all cells of the body. The brain particularly depends upon these mitochondria because the brain is such a highly metabolically active substance. Unfortunately, free radicals have a very profound and devastating effect on the mitochondria. What happens is that a free radical is able to damage the lipid layer that surrounds the mitochondria and interrupt its ability to perform its energy manufacturing process adequately. There are numerous examples in the medical literature that are correlating diseases such as Parkinson's disease, in which we know that there is a high degree of free radical damage to the area of the brain that actually produces a brain chemical called dopamine, which is deficient in Parkinson's disease.
I think it's very important to recognize that a holistic perspective is very advantageous when dealing with patients who have these brain neurodegenerative diseases, because clearly these patients are not simply suffering from brain problems. They have psychosocial problems, they typically have nutritional deficiencies, but more so, biochemically, we find that these patients have systemic disease. For example, in Parkinson's disease, we note that patients have mitochondrial abnormalities. The mitochondria are the small elements within every cell of their bodies whose job it is to utilize energy. Now, so frequently we see patients with Parkinson's disease and they complain of being fatigued, not being able to get around the house, not being able to carry out their purposeful activities of daily living. The typical response is to make a medication adjustment or to add another medication. But in actuality, the science tells us that these patients are suffering from a systemic or total body problem dealing with energy utilization. Now, this is a common experience in a variety of other neurodegenerative problems as well, like Alzheimer's disease and ALS and multiple sclerosis.
There's a lot more to this story. We can only cover so much in a single program. But join us next week. We're always sharing more on health and nutrition, ways to improve your life. I'm Gary Null. Have a nice week, everyone.